1 Samuel 31. Now the Philistines were fighting against Israel. The men of Israel fled from the Philistines, and many of them fell dead on Mount Gilboa. The Philistines stayed right on the heels of Saul and his sons. They struck down Saul's sons, Jonathan, Aminadab, and Malchishua. Saul himself was in the thick of the battle. The archer spotted him and wounded him severely. Saul said to his armor-bearer, "Draw your sword and stab me with it. Otherwise, these uncircumcised people will come stab me and torture me." But the armor-bearer refused to do it because he was very afraid. So Saul took his sword and fell on it. When the armor-bearer saw that Saul was dead, he also fell on his own sword and died with him. So Saul, his 3 sons, his armor-bearer, and all his men died together that day. When the men of Israel who were in the valley and across the Jordan saw the men of Israel had fled, and that Saul and his sons were dead, they abandoned the cities and fled. The Philistines came and occupied them. The next day, when the Philistines came to strip loot from the corpses, they discovered Saul and his 3 sons lying dead on Mount Gilboa. They cut off Saul's head and stripped him of his armor. They sent messengers to announce the news in the temple of their idols and among their people throughout the surrounding land of the Philistines. They placed Saul's armor in the temple of the Ashtoreths and hung his corpse on the city wall of Bethshan. When the residents of Jabesh Gilead heard what the Philistines had done to Saul, all their warriors set out and traveled throughout the night. They took Saul's corpse and the corpse of his son from the walls of Bethshan and went to Jabesh, where they buried them. They took the bones and buried them under the tamarisk tree at Jabesh. Then they fasted for 7 days. Now we're back to the battle. The battle is almost inconsequential. It's just going to give us minor details, but the demise of what happens. Yeah, both? Okay. So they're on Mount Gilboa. The Philistines are there. They are staying right on the heels. Saul and his sons, they struck down Saul's sons, Jonathan, Aminadab, and Malchishua. So the Philistines, they are successful in knocking down all the sons. So Saul's alone. His heirs are gone. Saul himself was in the thick of battle. An archer spotted him and wounded him severely. So Saul is now severely wounded. His sons are dead. I think he probably knows his sons are dead. One of the things I think when it does say this is there is a piece of this that is, it is unnatural for parents to watch their children die before them. And Saul, wanting to have an heir on the throne, knows there's no heir on the throne because his sons are dead. Therefore, he's able to see and know this has happened before his death. Or at least the reader of the story is. So he says to his armor-bearer, "Draw your sword and stab me with it. Otherwise, these uncircumcised people will stab me and torture me." But his armor-bearer refused to do it because he was very afraid. Who is he afraid of? Like, what retaliation is Saul's army going to do against him for doing this? Like, the army's being defeated. What retaliation is there of the army of doing that? What retaliation is there of the Philistines? If he does indeed kill Saul, he could turn around to the Philistines and say, "Look, I've slayed him," and try to switch sides. He might escape that way. I think he fears God. Whether Saul does or not, I think the armor-bearer does. And as David demonstrated time and time again, you do not strike the Lord's anointed and live. He just won't do it. He will not do it. So the armor-bearer, so Saul falls on his own sword. Interesting way, falling on his sword. So now the armor-bearer sees that Saul is dead. He falls on his own sword and dies too. Why does the armor-bearer fall on his own sword? Because he has failed. His job is to protect the king. He has failed in his job to protect the king. He has brought shame on himself. And so the thing to do of honor is to fall on your sword along with the king, to die alongside of him. I know that may not make sense to us, but in this context, in this setting, that's where it is. Also notice there's no judgment laid here. and Saul committed suicide and took his own life, which is a horrible thing to. There's none of that. This is in the heat of battle. Okay. And this is also an honorable thing to do, to avoid the torture, to avoid being a trophy for the enemies, being paraded around. Saul knows what they do. So in some ways, he is not just being selfish here in doing that to kill himself or to ask to be killed. He is in some ways doing an honorable thing. I know that may not seem like it to us, but anyway. So Saul and his 3 sons, his armor bearer, and all his men died together that day. All his men. Is all? I don't know if all is all, but it's total victory language, and that's what we're there. Yes, a swift death. Yes. And I think more of it, it's the being paraded around to the shame of Israel is more of it. Saul may have, thought more of the torture, but I'm saying the practice itself is more about the saving honor and saving face for your country instead of being the object of ridicule. When the men of Israel who were in the valley across the Jordan saw the men of Israel had fled and Saul and his sons were dead, they abandoned the cities and fled. So the cities over here hear the news and see that, hey, Saul and his men are all dead. The cities leave. They vacate. Like, I'm not sticking here to get burned and attacked and die. We're just going to leave. And the Philistines come and occupy the cities. The next day, they find when they're stripping the corpses that, hey, here's Saul and his 3 sons. So they cut off Saul's head, strip his army. They sent messengers to announce the news in the temple of their idols among their people throughout the surrounding land of the Philistines. So I think his head is being paraded around as a trophy, the same way Goliath's head was. And it says in their temple, I don't know if the head is being brought into their temple to their idols to be a trophy before, but that is certainly a possibility. They placed Saul's armor in the temple of the Ashtoreths and hung his corpse on the city wall of Bethshan. So his corpse goes and gets hung up on a wall, and we don't have his head there, but then we're going to find out, in fact, his sons' bodies are there too. So the residents of Jabesh Gilead hear about this and the disgrace and dishonor that's being done. So all their warriors set out and they travel throughout the night. This is such an important task. We're going to travel at night. We're going to get there as soon as possible. We're going to spend all effort we can. They take the corpses of his son from the city at Bethshan, and they went to Jabesh where they burned them. What? You mean there's cremation in the Bible? Yes. Yes, there's cremation in the Bible. They burn the bodies of King Saul and his sons. They take the bones and they bury them under the tamarisk tree at Jabesh. Then they fasted for 7 days. They're honoring the king and his sons. They are bringing the corpses, which had been displayed as a victory, to their gods and whatever. They're on the wall. They take them down. It doesn't matter if there was difficulty or not. They were successful. So the story is just they took them. So they take them and they burn them. So, that's what they did. Why? Because the bones are the things that you bury. Now, often, later on, the practice begins. You wrap someone, you put them in the tomb, and then you come back a year later. I don't know if it had to be precisely a year, but I think it was on the anniversary of their death. You come back a year later, you collect the bones, and you put the bones in an ossuary. And so the bones are going to be where many family members are going to be in a box. So sometimes the boxes were for one family member. Sometimes the boxes would have multiple, depending what time period you're in. But the bones are the thing that are important. Remember when Jacob was coming out or going into the land of Egypt, he said, make sure you take my bones with you when you leave Egypt. And they do. He buries him outside of Joseph says, take my bones with you. And so they take Joseph to bury him in the land. So this is a tamarisk tree. They bury him, and then they fast for 7 days. Well, ritual purification of touching the dead doesn't take that long. So here, the fasting is going to be, I think, in mourning for the death of their king. So they are going to mourn the death of Saul the king. Whether Saul was good or not does not matter. He was God's anointed, and we are going to mourn for him. We're going to give him an honor funeral the way that should be. Which, interesting, there are a couple of people who end up buried without heads. We have here with Saul, Later on, we have it with John, where they're both beheaded, and we don't have the head. The heads are put on display, but we don't have the heads being brought and buried with them later, or any mention of it. So, all right, there we do. We've finished